All right. So this is exciting. It's already built up like 3 hours of momentum from the last 3 hours of the summit. We just concluded a very intense cyber hour with our friend from Israel, and all the speakers were really fascinating. And I think this is just keeping the momentum up. For the next hour, we're going to talk about the ecosystem of cyber in UK. And in this panel and roundtable, we have great speakers. Needless to say, but really great active leaders in the industry. Many of whom I have had the pleasure to work with. My colleague here, Gavin, and many of whom I have shared the stage with. David, great to see you again. I wish we could do Riyadh all over back again in one stage, but we'll have to wait for the next time. Ray, sir, great to see you here. Thanks for joining us. I know you're kind of jumping off from another call to here. I think Robert will join us as well in a little bit. He's wrapping up another talk. And Patrick, great to have you here. This hour, we're going to talk about a very, a very significant topic. I think that threads across our entire summit about uh, cyber ecosystem and how to keep it together during the COVID and pandemic. I think cyber has been actually, I would say, kind of the backbone of communication and keeping it together anyway, right? We had so many exciting plans in early 2020 when we met in Davos, and then with David and Riyadh, and then Israel and all that. uh, the plans all of a sudden changed, and now we live in a completely different world. But one thing didn't change: it's the importance of cyber. In fact, it went much further ahead. I think without the securing our cyber infrastructure, there is no way we could have been talking today. Our lives have been appended in some ways, but in many ways, it's been held together by the great work that you all do. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome and probably just go through a quick introduction. Then we'll go dive into the topic. We'll talk about the ecosystem and how the COVID situation has helped or hurt us, and then the cyber capacity building exercise that you all are involved in many ways, doing your day job and also contributing to the industry with your learning, mentorship, and coaching. And then we'll talk about what takeaways do we have, what is the call to action for us for this year and the 5 year that CFF is looking to put together. So I'll just go in the way I see the screens line up in front of me. So Ray, if I may, ask you to introduce yourself first, sir.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody, and thank you for having me join you on this panel. So I'm Ray Stanton. I've been working in security and risk for a number of years, and both on the supply side and as a practitioner. And most recently, I completed a 2.5 year role in the Nordics as a group CISO for a telecoms, TV, content, and media organization. And today, I'm now with IBM as a partner in their security business unit, supplying services to customers globally.
Excellent. Thank you, Ray. Gavin, I see you next on the screen. A quick introduction, please.
Thanks, Val. Thank you for having me. Firstly, similar to Ray, spent a number of years in security, maybe not quite as many. I've probably spent the last 15 years within Big Four consulting. Prior to that, worked in a boutique and then had 5 years at British Telecom working within within their security expert team. Today, I guess, focus more on the consumer related markets, so not FS, and generally a risk driven conversation rather than a regulated conversation, albeit that is certainly changing with more regulation coming in on that side as well. But I'm really happy to be here.
This is how things are, right? Somebody has to knock you out of mute, and then you go back into action. So then, thank you, Kevin, for the introduction. Let's go to Patrick for your introduction, please.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm obviously Patrick. Work for an organization where putting my face on screens while saying who I work for is, of course, restricted, hence the way that I'm doing it today. So I'm the technical lead for Cyber First as a government program to have a whole initiative to build a pipeline of talent into the industry. It starts pretty young at around 12 years old, and then we go into kind of undergraduate and apprenticeship graduate type roles. So it's kind of a cradle to grave for cyber. I haven't quite gone down lower than that, but that's where we're at. And my role is to make the content do the things that we want. Anyone can write technical, clever content, but if it doesn't inspire or teach people something or allow them to do something they couldn't do before, then it can be somewhat meaningless. So I'm very much on the delivery side of cybersecurity training and experiences to try and move people into that industry from perhaps an initial reluctance.
Wow, excellent. I think that's a job we definitely need in this business, especially the four of us on the other side who are delivering the actual services. We need more and more people who actually can deliver it with us, for us, right? So thank you, Patrick, for your role in this critical, the ecosystem. Next, let me move to David. David, your introduction, please.
Yeah, so David Fairbrush. Wear a few hats, actually, that are relevant here. So I'm the global head of cyber futures for KPMG International just now. So I worry a lot about the longer term, the trends, how we transform our workforce in KPMG. I'm also managing director for my own small boutique consultancy called Beyond Blue. But the other hat I wear that's relevant is I chair the National Cyber Resilience Board for Scotland. And I do a lot with the ministers and the community in Scotland around how we build out the capacity, the talent base. And as Patrick said, right the way down to what that means at school level, frankly. And I've been in the profession for 35 years, long before we called it cyber.
That is so great to hear. And I think that drives home that this industry has gone through its own long-winded path of being called differently, and until we landed on cybersecurity, which seems to have some stickiness and people are paying attention. So thank you, David. And in the interim, we'll wait for an introduction from our friend Robert, who's going to join us as he finishes other call. So let me ask or get started with asking about your view of the cyber capacity and talent. Do we need more talent? Do we need more automation? Are we on track on either of these? And as I talk to many of our customers and clients, and also a lot of the CFF community members, most of whom are in our roles, they're peers to us and running businesses or running agencies and countries, sometimes they're national heads. We come to hear that, well, we need a million or so of cyber talent, but there has to be a dissection of this into things that we need now versus things that have to be put in the pipeline so that our friend here, Patrick, can go line them up for us, right? So let me start by asking David, in terms of the current state of cyber capacity and the role of the cyber industry, as you kind of paint this future of cyber in your role, what do you see? What do you drive action towards?
So there's a couple of challenges. So I had a look back actually on the cyber skills survey work that actually the DCMS ran for the UK. Just to answer in my own mind the question of, is there a cyber skills gap? And at one level, it's pretty obvious there is, because you get a very resounding picture back that says, a lot of firms have got very basic cybersecurity skills gaps just now. I think 48%, I think was the figure for this year, down from 54% a couple of years ago. And that's very basic. It's just firms needing the skill set to help them implement the very core of cyber essentials, the very basic cybersecurity technical measures just now. And that feels quite concerning and quite worrying. And then you look beyond that to larger firms who have more specific niche skill shortages, which are growing sometimes. So forensic skills in incident response just now, This whole area of cloud security that's developing and emerging as well. Everybody's trying to struggle to adapt with quite so quickly because of the impact of COVID and the move to cloud and digital working as well. So there's a set of quite specific skills. So one of my challenges is looking ahead a little bit. So it feels fundamentally concerning that we have those basic cyber skills gaps just now, which are stopping a lot of small, medium-sized enterprises being cyber secure. So there's a pipeline issue that needs to be addressed there. But there's also something about the way those skills requirements may change over time just now. So we're seeing obviously that move to cloud. We're seeing a lot more automation and embedding of security functionality in there. And it's pushing firms back into what really fundamentally is their responsibility versus those technology providers, the cloud providers, Amazon, Azure, GCP downstream. And it brings firms right back to some core issues about understanding identity and access management, what information really matters to the firm, the risk management issues, and how do you deal with an incident or a crisis. And that's a skill set you can't get rid of because that's something a firm always has to care about. And the other thing that came back from, I think, the UK survey was the question about soft skills just now. We're very good at having technical cyber people just now. And yes, you need that depth. But often a lot of what businesses are looking for is people who have some of those communication skills, leadership skills, and an ability to actually interact with the business as well. So it's a bit like, what's a CISO? I've seen some really, really good CISOs come up through the technical stream. Brilliant. I've also seen some really good CISOs cross-skill from business and learn cybersecurity from the top down as well. And both work for me. So what I guess I'm looking for now is downstream, this skills base is going to change. So I'm going to see a lot more automation coming into the field, a lot more automation of compliance, security orchestration, response just now, and even passing some of the hassle of managing those day-to-day technical security controls to providers of services in future, such as the big cloud providers. That will change the skills requirements over time. And that requires us to think a little bit further ahead than just dealing with the here and now skills gaps as well. So I think the field is changing.
I think that's a pretty broad picture of what we need to get prepared for. And then maybe I next turn to Patrick as to he's seeing the tail end of this, right, and preparing the whole or motivating new entrants into this field. So Patrick, your thoughts on what you are seeing, both being at the front end of what you were doing, spearheading the cyber capacity build up, but also the tail end of the ask for the industry, right? Because it's a long tail to catch up to.
Yeah, thank you very much. And David, that's a brilliant setup. Quoting DCMS with some stats means I don't have to. Happy days. So that fundamental problem, how do we teach the kids of today to have the skill set to solve the problems of tomorrow, given that we don't even have the technology of tomorrow yet? And that's the kind of thing I'm forever trying to get across. This isn't about teaching them to be sysadmins or network engineers. Yeah, they need that skill set. It's very much about, how about a problem you've never seen before? How are you gonna deal with it? Now, that means I need a really diverse group of people who can look at problems from all kinds of angles, some of which have empathy and emotional intelligence, and I generally don't get that group of people in technology post 18. So how do I show people with soft skills, and I really value soft skills, and technical skills in the same person to see that that beyond 18 they have a place? And I guess that's the whole Cyber First ethos and mantra is, how do we show them the context of the things they could do with technical skills rather than acquire technical skills for their own sake? That works for the boys. It doesn't work for the girls. And I am generalizing slightly there, but those are the stats. Now, our problem in the UK is we lose about 80% of our kids who do not select computer science as a GCSE when they're 13 or 14 years old, meaning they haven't got a technical way of gaining incremental knowledge until they're 18 again, or they come off the conventional path. So this is a pipeline. This is for the majority. I've lost more than the majority at a young age group, and I've lost 95% of all of the girls. So this is a dreadful situation if I want diverse people from all kinds of backgrounds adding to cybersecurity problem solving of all kinds of problems. So we're really in a bad state in terms of the stats, but everything that we're doing is trying to model something to fix that. So our main structure is, how do we show people that computer science is not this subject you study in its own right to become a programmer? It's a subject like maths and English you use in absolutely everything as a key requirement of engaging with the jobs of tomorrow and the fourth industrial revolution. When teachers don't know that context, when schools are not familiar with that context, when you don't have that context in conventional subjects, I'm forever talking to geography teachers about data science is so important, and the security of data being shared in data science is so important. Why can't we have this in a geography lesson? Or a history teacher saying, look, fake news is a massive problem. Provenance of sources, reliability of sources are technical as well as history related expertise. How do I get those kind of things into a history lesson? So that's where we're trying to go with digital and IT, and then hopefully I have a big pond of people who've done technical stuff that we can go fishing in for the cyber, rather than a really small pond of the same types of people, and we're all fishing in the same one. So trying to scale that, let kids know they have an aptitude for lots of different things, and I don't want to patronize anyone here, but a forensic analyst loves process and a pen tester loves creativity. They're finding the things not written down. If you don't know which one you are, you're going to go down a path that you just might not enjoy and assume everything is the same. So how do I let people kind of choose different things to have a play with, so they begin to work out kind of what they are? And I guess that's our challenge, so that we can then populate the industry, and all industries, and not just the cyber technical industry, but with people who have a foundation in technical stuff, some cyber stuff, and can make the UK for our problem the safest place in the world to do online business.
Oh, absolutely. That is great. I think this is probably, and I'll be very candid with you, I've heard many people talk about the need for cyber talent, and Patrick, you nailed it. In terms of the kind of choices we want to provide when we want to expand this pool of cyber talent or pipeline that we want to build, everybody doesn't need to be cyber threat hunter. We don't need 1.5 million cyber threat hunters or SOC analysts. And I think that's why this team is so well representative in terms of what the actual business need is, because all of us have had different paths to get where we are today. So thank you, Patrick. Ray, next, I'd move to you to share your thoughts about what you're seeing in the industry and in the market, and also you have played those roles of leading cybersecurity programs in the industry. So your thoughts, please, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Val. Interesting perspectives from my colleagues on the call, and I can only echo many of what they've said. So I'll look at it as from a practical perspective as well, because we do need those people at all levels. But the trouble is we do keep swimming in the same pool and fishing in the same pool with the same people. So I'll bring a real example here of experience. Just recently, in my last role, as I was saying, in the Nordics, very small pool of people that we could capitalize on. And we recognize this in working even with the national program to try and develop skills. So you need to develop the skills young, and alternatively as well. So what do I mean by that? We were launching programs which were very much like the STEM programs that we've seen nationally, not just in the UK, but in other countries. And that builds on exactly the type of thing that Patrick was talking about. So we saw that across the Nordics, and the opportunity to work with young people and help educate them on what those opportunities and career paths could be. But the alternative is also important. So working with some industry groups, we actually looked at those type of people that had matching skill levels or the ability to apply themselves. So people that might match, for example, with only 50 to 60% skill, that were known skills that they needed. And then we would look at matching and developing the other skill base that they had. Because that way we were looking at other people at all types of levels, whether technical, whether leaders, managers, it didn't matter. We were looking at them at all different areas, but from outside of the risk and security industry. And that was really important, because then you're fishing in a bigger pool and you're looking at people that bring also alternative views. Now, unfortunately for the security and risk community, we are very wedded in traditional views, even though we have to deal with new evolutions and threats and things that we have to deal with every single day. But we are very much an industry which is, if it's not invented here, then we worry about it. And that's a very difficult culture thing to deal with. The other area that we dealt with and we looked at and we trialed and was around looking at special groups of people that had, different disabilities. And one of the areas that we looked at, for example, was groups on the high autistic spectrum. And working with this charity group, we looked to bring in a group of people, and we trialed and we brought in, and it was working very well. Very difficult though. And people that were high on the autism spectrum, and we looked at roles that we could use them for because they had very specific needs in terms of how they would integrate into the organization. So there was as much about dealing with that and the people that they would be working with so that they could work together. But the skills and the sharpness of intelligence and different processes and thoughts that they brought to the table was fantastic. So, for example, some of these people were working in our security operations and right down into the technical weeds of data mining and threat hunting, doing that real mind-numbing stuff that people enjoy, but they really were very, very good at it. Now, also combined with that, you need high automation, not just for those groups of people, but automation. So I'll come on to that more in a second. But what that says is that we have to be careful not to ignore groups of people that can absolutely bring something to change the way that we deal with things and to actually fix our problems, just because society looks at them slightly differently. And that's the point I would look at and bring to the table there. So that's that perspective, right? The pools of people. Look at people that maybe only match 50-60% of your current skill needs, and then those people that are viewed maybe differently or have special needs. And automation, absolutely we need more and more automation, because then it will allow the restricted groups of pools of skills and people that we have to be laser focused, because most of the activity will have been taken place by the automation. It means they can be laser focused on the problems that they actually need to address. So I think that's an absolute for me. I'll hand you.
Well, thank you, Kwa. That was quite a bit. I think it's building up towards where we want the momentum to be. So thank you very much, Ray. Let's move to Gavin. You and I have worked recently and on large, I think, transformational programs where we really need to have a significant impact and input from the very beginning. Gavin, what are your thoughts on building that cyber capacity or getting the ecosystems contribute to that from the get-go?
Yeah, I think a lot of good points have been made, Val. I'll maybe concentrate on a couple of alternative ones. I think firstly you've got interesting. I think Patrick mentioned about the different types of CISO, and maybe David, you mentioned that as well. And I think one of the issues we have in recognizing that cybersecurity is not just a technical stream is actually a lot of the CISOs, the majority of the CISOs quite often have come up through a technical route. And therefore, as we may all be guilty of, we look for people similar to us. And I think one of the things cyber suffers within a business is that it doesn't break out well into business conversation and maybe gets to those conversations late. And therefore, I do think that need that Patrick was talking about, getting others in who can translate technical subject to the business, and finding those individuals is tough, because I don't, if I look at some of the resource requests I get, they are often for that, I need an architect, I need to sort out DevOps, and a lot of that naturally sort of focuses on that technical side. Whereas actually, if I look at the successful programs, they are largely those that recognize there is that need to have a sort of business translator to work with those sort of more technical roles. So I think, that is something we've all got to work on to almost showcase that cyber needs that blend, because I don't think it is fully understood externally to cyber, but equally a lot of us in cyber probably do sort of pigeonhole where those skills need to come from. And I think I wrote down some of the key capacity gaps are cloud security architects, the sort of the break into operational technology now. There's a load of things there that have shortages, but Patrick, David, you sort of made me more aware that it's actually a lot of that business translation that is a significant gap as well, and I don't think that can be underestimated. So that's maybe the point one. The other point, in terms of maybe some practical steps where we can get some of this talent from, I absolutely agree with going and looking at how people get into cyber at a young age. But equally, I think if you look at some of the things I'm being asked to try and secure now from clients we work with, it's a lot. How can you secure emerging tech? RPA, sort of big data lakes, big data. Working with DevOps teams that are working very differently now, and a lot of that needs us to understand what they do a lot better. And I don't think there's too many skills in cyber, or too much capacity in cyber that can do that well. So I certainly think we need to latch on to developers, to data scientists, to those who work in automation, and learn some of their skills and get them to come into cyber and really help us upskill. So I think that's important. Then probably the last point I'll just mention to close, Val, is to Ray mentioned. I think everyone mentioned automation, but Ray touched on it at the end. I actually think there's two levels of automation. One is the sort of stuff where we can take some of the tasks away through some basic RPA and robotics. I think there's a more obvious opportunity where, as security professionals, people love jumping to technology as the answer, and rarely, I would say, that technology is fully utilized. And I think we can probably free up a lot of capacity by better using some of the technology we have access to automate some of the tasks that we still like to do manually, or we still like to do an interview via Teams these days. I think a lot of that can actually use that technology smarter, and almost we can sweat our assets more to get more out of them. And I think that includes actually getting rid of a lot of the stuff that we do today around some of the compliance activities, audit activities. A lot of those can be made more efficient by better using technology, and then free up some of that capacity.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's a great continuation of the thought that we had that kind of started accumulating the last couple of hours. Of course, this is something we do for a living, but it's hard to explain the way automation actually helps bring up capacity to do things that we can do today, right? That also is an opportunity for younger people to come jump in and learn from scratch when things can be done from scratch, right? Typically, there is so much big push towards getting people in, but also the people needs to go with process and technology, and they all need to work in harmony, which we're all kind of aligned to do. So thank you for your comments, Gavin. Well, I see our friend Robert is here. Great to see you. And what a change of scene when we last met in Davos, and after that we have been. I mean, it's been a kind of crazy roller coaster ride. Thank you for joining us, Robert. I think the audience here would benefit from a quick introduction from you, and then probably your thoughts on what we just heard here.
Sure. Apologies for my lateness. I was presenting at another conference, and as always happens, that ran over. So I'm Robert Coles. I currently have what they call a portfolio career. So I'm a chair of a consulting company. I'm a non-executive director. I'm an advisor to the government of Singapore, to a bank, to a US pharma. And essentially what I try and do is keep busy and interested and without having to work full time, which is working very well. I'm happily enjoying it. Previous to that, I've done more than 30 years in security in various roles. I was the CISO for the National Health Service for the UK. I was the first CISO for GlaxoSmithKline, the first CISO for National Grid, which is a US, UK gas and electricity utility. The first CISO for Merrill Lynch, who lived outside of the US as a global CISO. I had various head of roles at Royal Bank of Scotland, and I was a partner in KPMG, and I set up the first security practice there. So thoughts on cyber capacity? Well, I've seen various reports over the last year or so saying that we are globally suffering a shortfall of anywhere between 1 and 3 million, depending on which report you read, in terms of security roles. There's more demand for security roles than there is people available to fill them. I have to say I haven't seen that personally, except in some very specific geographies and markets. So when I was at GSK, I wanted to set up a security operation covering the East. I looked at Malaysia, principally because it was cheap, and I wanted some senior people that could really talk to business people right across the organization in the East. And I couldn't find them there. I found very detailed technical people. I could run people that could work in a SOC. I couldn't find senior people. So in the end, I went to Singapore. I had to pay a lot more for those people, but they were plentiful, and I found a really good team. Similarly, I tried to set up at National Grid a security team just outside of Boston, 30 miles outside of Boston, Massachusetts, at a town called Waltham, and really struggled to attract people. People didn't want to come out from Boston, and Boston didn't have a great preponderance of security people anyway. In the end, I set up in Metrotech in Brooklyn, and I attracted people from New York. Again, they were expensive, but if you're willing to create the right sort of innovative packages for people, then you can attract them. So, but those are good examples. It's a marketplace, so there is supply and demand, and where there's more demand, prices rise, as happens in markets. I did just want to pick up a point that Ray made about how do you fill that capacity looking a bit innovatively. One of the great successes I had at GSK was a project manager when I joined. She'd originally been an engineer, and her actual claim to fame was that she created a unique and different type of bottle top and put that into production in a company. When I got to GSK, she was a project manager, and she'd been running a series of small security projects, and she was just a great talent. I persuaded her that she'd actually been working on quite a lot of security projects and probably knew quite a lot about security actually. And she looked at security as being a possible new career for her. She was bored being a project manager. So I sponsored her to go on a master's degree at one of the local universities covering information security. She did that in a year and got a distinction. And I gave her a number of opportunities to work in different areas of my team, and she picked up some practical knowledge by doing that. And after I left GSK, she became one of the youngest women CISOs. She's now the CISO at Urenco, which is a uranium processing organization in the UK. So great success, the sort of talent that you wouldn't normally expect to think would be able to develop in security, but given the right support and given the right motivation, made a massive success of it. So I'll leave my thoughts there. Back to you, Val.
All right, great. That's great, Robert. You just gave an account of the industry itself, right? What we have struggled with as an industry over time, and that probably would motivate Patrick to do his job really, really, really well. Not that he's not doing, but I think that's where the support also needs to come from, right? Thank you. I think the second segment of this hour, we want to think about and share our collective and I think lessons learned from in terms of the COVID, right? This pandemic, as we started off this hour with talking about, has changed the way we do business. We do not, run our, still our schools are all remote, and many places lockdowns and all. The only thing that has kept us together has been the internet and the connectivity that we have. Sometimes that needs some break too. So I would go around this room. Probably, Gavin, I start with you on your thoughts around what are we seeing, what have we seen to start with earlier in the year when we saw pandemic lockdowns and all of a sudden everybody is caught in this middle of changing to remote workforce, and then how that has kind of evolved over time. I think we'll go around the room and share those experiences. Gavin, please.
Sure, Val. Yeah, I think we did quite a lot on this early on, and have continued to. So I can probably reflect on some of the. I did a few webinars at the time, sort of a few weeks into, I guess, lockdown. And one of the first observations was in cyber. I think threats are going up, and people are now at home, and there's a whole sort of awareness and comms piece that needed to step up to remind people of some of the basics of what they needed to do around security. So that there was that sort of driver. But what I was seeing, if I then sort of reflect on our sort of schedule and demand around work, is there were certainly bits of it that were being pushed back as businesses were pivoting, working out what that meant, and some work went back. What didn't ever go down and actually increased is conversation around cyber, and I think it was critical for us at that time to keep having conversations and kind of recognize early on that the answer is more digital services and more reliance on the sort of technology we're using now, and therefore there naturally was going to be a lot more interest from a cyber perspective, and that absolutely. So probably 4 to 6 weeks of maybe some stuff moving to the right and delaying, but actually after that probably an increase by a good sort of significant percentage of workload. Conversation has continued ever since. And so I think firstly, as an industry, cyber is clearly very robust and even more in demand now, I guess would be one comment. I think the flip of that, it's a very lucky place to be as an industry. Clearly, there's other industries that have suffered with demand, and I think on the flip of that, though, what you see, and I ran a roundtable for. I work quite a lot with consumer product organizations, and a number of CISOs there got together, and we were talking about well-being. And I think with that demand and with the new ways of working, there has certainly been reflection that as CISOs on the call, but also their team, that increased workload, and how do you manage some of that? How do you get off time? How do you have a break? How do you actually interact more than just having 15 to 20 Teams calls a day? And some really good ideas there coming in about just getting some stuff through in the post for certain key meetings, sending sort of gifts to your team. Internally we ran sessions that we called pods, and just the rule was you couldn't talk about work, but everyone got 60 to 90 seconds to talk about just what they're doing, or if they had any questions. And actually on reflection, that was probably one of my favorite meetings of the week. We did that weekly, and we learned probably more than I'd known about some of the team before that, and that was actually a real benefit of the sort of the new way of working. So I think that that would be a second point. And then lastly, maybe if I look at just maybe a change from a cyber perspective, I think there's a bit of concern over people working remotely, and you're less connected, and therefore people are maybe distracted. And we all know about or heard about the increase in things like phishing attacks and phishing attempts. So there was concerns there. But one of the areas that I talked through with a few clients were around just what you do on things like monitoring now, and how that has changed when you have half, or if not all, your workforce working remotely, and what that does to how you previously would have monitored your network and the sort of threats you're looking out for. And so your baseline was very different. So as a technical change, that is something I know a number have sort of, some have flipped to pretty well. Others are trying to work out what they need to do differently to stay on top of some of the threats, given their workforce is very now distributed, and they don't necessarily understand it as the history they would have had from all the different trends they had over the years. So I think a few different perspectives, Val, but hopefully there's three things there that I would certainly flag that have come in or changed as part of the lockdown.
Thank you, Kevin. I think let's expand on the thought, David. I'd look for your comments. Build up on that, please.
Yeah, so happy to. And I'm probably going to end up endorsing a lot of what Gavin's just said. So I had the fun of coordinating KPMG's global cyber piece on COVID-19, which was challenging, but also it was a really good opportunity to see a community pull together. So let me pull out a couple of points from that. So the best cases I saw were pragmatism between the CIO and the CISO in organizations. So they had to fundamentally change ways of working, not just enabling remote working, but shifting to digital channels. Sometimes do that very, very quickly. All of a sudden, things like Microsoft Teams rollout that would have taken, 18 months conservatively, happened in the space of 2, frankly, and a massive change of working culture alongside that. And it meant a lot of pragmatism on the part of the CISO. So organizations had to start taking risk sometimes to accelerate that transformation and rollout, because the consequences of not doing that was, well, you're out of business in some occasions, actually. But some of the CISOs also took it as a really good opportunity to embed some strong control measures. They did that around Office 365 as well, so ATP, multi-factor. So I actually saw sometimes security being accelerated, but there were some risks, and Gavin's touched on a few. So one of the challenges we ran into often was a lot of the assumptions you make about the way people behave in controlled physical premises with supervision are broken when you move to a home working model. So all of a sudden you end up sharing a flat with somebody, you end up being interrupted mid-call. It's much harder to monitor what you do. The call center workers were a particular challenge for some of the clients I dealt with, because they were used to running and managed, supervised call centers. But all of a sudden that's changed. So they had to find different ways of engaging the staff, different ways of worrying about the insider threat component, different ways sometimes of doing the monitoring. Those baselines had to reset, because all of a sudden the way people access systems had changed. So it wasn't 9 to 5 working anymore. It was interspersed. Personal time, work time had blurred, and the boundaries had gone. And also there was a lot more BYOD just now, because some people were not in a position to provide corporate IT quickly to everybody. They had to be pragmatic again. So everything became Office 365 or BYOD for some clients. So we're now seeing a little bit of a catch-up where second line risk and the security teams are beginning to adapt to the fact this is now a long-term way of working, and we're not going back, actually. So this working pattern has changed permanently. And the threat piece was interesting. Did the threat increase, or did it just morph and adapt? And we saw some really entrepreneurial and creative organized crime scams on the back of fear, uncertainty, and doubt for COVID. Yeah, we absolutely did. It was a really good example of how organized crime adapts. But the communities now had time to respond to some of that and get some of the takedown operations organized. And this sense of community mattered to me. So in Scotland, it was great because I saw better working between the Scottish Government, Police Scotland, and the security community in Scotland than I had ever seen. And some of that was threat intelligence sharing. But some of it was also just pro bono assistance to people like charities just now who just weren't able to secure that new working model using their own resources. So for me, COVID-19 has been a rapid acceleration to new ways of working. It's a bit of security catch-up to do along the way, but sometimes that new way of working is actually more secure than the previous just now. But it has required people to think differently about the human dimension in all of it. And Gavin said that. How do you keep people engaged? How do you keep the morale levels? How do you monitor and engage people and watch for the signs of disillusionment? And frankly, for some of our clients, how do you handle the joiners, movers, and leavers piece that comes with a massive organizational disruption? As staff go on furlough, they come back from furlough, you're trying to reintegrate them as well. So it has been a massive period of turbulence, but don't underestimate the pragmatism and the fact it's brought some of those cybersecurity issues quite high up in the corporate agenda, as some of those changes were pushed through very, very quickly sometimes. So it's been a fascinating journey, actually, and we're not done yet.
That is so true. We are not done yet, and it's so intriguing to think like humanity has been forced to this challenge and how we deal with it. Everybody's got a different. Nobody has the right playbook, and everybody's learning, right? So we're in this constant motion. So thank you, David, for your thoughts. Well, let's move to Patrick. You heard how the industry has evolved with Robert's outlining literally his career, but not just a career, the industry experience of growing and building teams, and then Gavin talking about the different aspects, and David outlining the effect of COVID and what we had to deal with in the short 9 months. It's been such a long time. So how can we take this forward and take this learning with us?
Okay, so I'm not going to go over things that have just been covered, but I will tell you, working for a government organisation, suddenly all going to remote working was an amazing opportunity to get a load of stuff sorted that we've been struggling with for years, and now it's fabulous. I can work from home and all the kit works, and yeah, brilliant. So I mean that's one view, but very specifically, we built a whole program of face-to-face residential. Trainers in the room, safe environment, bring the kit, sanitize the kit from a data perspective and a cyber hygiene perspective as opposed to a virus perspective. And then all of a sudden, do we just cancel everything for the entire summer? Do we just stop our program? So I've seen a number of attempts to virtualize what we do. And I've learned some lessons, and I guess that's the thing I'm going to get across. If you take a physical delivery of something that you're very comfortable with and you just put it on the virtual, it's dull as dishwater. People talking to PowerPoint presentations, and there's no interaction, and you're just sitting in a room listening, and you can't really talk to your friends because you're on Teams and the microphones all come out of sync. It's just horrible and really uninspiring and dull. And I can't say how much I disliked the 6 weeks of that training I have actually done this summer. But when somebody's thinking, all right, how are we going to keep people going? How are we going to engage people? We ran an 8-week undergraduate academy. So those students were in our academy virtual for 8 weeks. I mean, I was really making noises like we really need to make sure we care for their mental health, and we don't just have PowerPoint for 8 weeks. And what it showed me was, if you think about lots of, as has been discussed, that you have breakout rooms, you have non-study chat, non-work chat, you have opportunities to kind of socialize, but use the technology to help that. That really worked. That was really fabulous. The students, I think we had hundreds of students on it, managed to really enjoy their experience and were very positive about it at the end, because it was borne in mind, this is a virtual thing. We can't just do what we normally do. So kind of to summarize, we now have a kind of a virtual, slightly less exciting, slightly less interactive, but cheap with wider reach. And I would say, you experts in cloud, can you please stop all that lag and stopping all the labs not working? And that's just very frustrating when you got hundreds of people having a go at some stuff and it just doesn't work. And then we're going to have a decision to make when let's say there is a post-COVID world at some point. Do we bring the kids back and spend lots of money on the accommodation and the trainers and the residential stuff, or do we try and make it better but do more of it at scale? And I guess that's the thing we're going to have to to kind of adapt to, and asking people what they want, asking schools what they want at the moment, you might as well, just be blowing in the wind, because schools cannot answer in any kind of a question now. That every environment is just having a mare in terms of organization. So we're going to have to kind of make a plan. Maybe we stick with an awful lot of this remote working. Maybe we stick with an awful lot of this remote delivery. But we really need to bear in mind that this gives us opportunities as well as downside, and we really need to rebalance, because I just don't see us going back to the past, and I don't want it to be dull. So that the challenge is take the best of both worlds and move forward.
Yeah, I think the changes and challenges that we had, especially with the learning ecosystem, is incredible. In the first or in the second panel that we had today was with academicians who have actually dealt with this, and those who are used to the brick and mortar system and have moved into online, and the changes in interaction and engagement is just sets a different ballgame altogether. So with that, let me move to Robert for your comments, Robert, on the what Patrick just outlined is, great to be home. I can't thank enough what's going on in terms of keeping us home, but I think it will change the engagement. Has also probably changed some of the plans that we had to build, deliver, and expand cyber capacity. What are your thoughts on what could be done here in engaging new entrants into this field?
Sure. So when I was thinking about this and just reflecting on what's happened in the last 6 months or so, just for the US audience benefit, the UK went into lockdown end of March, beginning of April. Strong messages from the Prime Minister saying stay at home, don't go to work, don't go to pubs and restaurants. In fact, pubs and restaurants were closed, and only essential activities, only essential exercise for short periods outside. So during that period, we saw a lot of projects were stopped. The UK economy was just really in dire straits. A lot of organizations were strapped for cash. Their cash flow was an issue. So a lot of projects, particularly security projects, were just halted in midstream and shelved. Some of those were stopped entirely. Some of them were delayed. In July, the Prime Minister started to change tack and said we could lift restrictions and encourage everyone to go back to work, and a lot of projects started up again. The economy got going again, lots of stimulus from central government into the economy, and that was all very well and good until the second wave came along. We're now in the second wave, and half the UK is now shut down in lockdown again. The other half is in restrictions again. But the projects now are continuing to run. I've found, working from home is the new normal. It is expected. And just building on something David and Gavin said, actually, there's been a lot of pragmatic security decision making. So, when lockdown happened, split tunneling was introduced in organizations very quickly because the VPN concentrators couldn't cope with the capacity. Employees were having to use their own devices because organizations didn't have enough portable devices to be able to set up in people's homes. So that meant that they couldn't do the sort of monitoring that they would have done on a corporate device. So pragmatic decisions were made to not do the monitoring because people didn't want to load software and think that that their employer was monitoring their personal use of their personal device. I think, as David said, I saw Teams being rolled out extremely rapidly. I'd been at Willis Towers Watson for the previous year in an interim role as interim CISO, and they've been trying to roll out Teams for about 9 months. And when lockdown happened, they managed to roll it out across the entire organization of 40,000 people in a matter of a few weeks. So it's a very sort of pragmatic decision making and reactivity as a result of all of that lockdown activity.
Yeah, again, learning on the fly, and these waves just don't seem to cease. Thank you, Robert. I think we're going to hold on tight as we ride this out. finally, I want to get some thoughts from you, Ray, on this and the learning. I'm sure this is this can hardly be condensed into a few minutes, but let's try.
Excellent, and thank you. So, just to build out, I'm going to cover a few points that build on what people have said. Obviously, the initial problems that we first saw have abated, but these have evolved into different challenges. And I think that's the key thing to remember, and to bring that to life. The guys have talked about, and I know it is all guys, so organizational health, thinking about people, which Gavin talked about, and the well-being of people. But I will connect that to the challenge and increase in internal and insider threats. Having been in organizations that have had insider threats and insider problems that have come from insider threats, just be wary of that and think about that as you see people put under more pressure from their home working and the challenges we face. Simple things you can do to look at them, some of those challenges and where they might be found, ranging from your corporate or company surveys and your people surveys. See where people are really feeling pressurized. But there is the factor of organizational health, so that's key for me as well. And one of the key items that I've seen, which I think is fantastic, is that all of this, from COVID and where we are to today, as we continue through this challenge, is that this has helped organizations really understand about business resilience. And that resilience ranging from whether we've got technologies, whether we've got the processes, whether we onboard people, whether our policies work, and that has driven that pragmatism and practical approaches that the guys have talked about. And I think that's fantastic. But that's going to need to continue, because this isn't going away soon, and it continues to be a challenge for us. And my final point about is, think of smaller companies. We generalize when we come on these panels and talk about larger companies. We talk enterprises, we talk corporates, we talk 40,000 users, we talk 400,000, we talk 300,000, we talk 20,000. Think about the small organizations that are challenged and that don't have these skill bases. And I think it was David who talked about the charity side and how we can help as the larger organizations, these smaller companies who don't have that immediate access, but still need some support. The BSI and the Business Continuity Institutes identified that normally, I think it was the last was about 90% of small organizations in the SME sector, when they have a standard impact in business continuity, they fail to recover and go under. So that's an inherent ask on us as larger organizations to see what we can do to help those smaller companies.
Very well. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for bringing that up. And I'll have to admit that this is not by design, but we have a small business cyber roundtable next to ours. That is what we're going into. And it couldn't have been a great, segue into that. So I think when it comes to big organizations, they cannot stand alone. They need smaller enterprises working with them. Smaller enterprises are small, but they form a critical part of the supply chain. The third-party risk that we expose ourselves when we don't take care of the smaller enterprises, just handing him over a security assessment, it's not the way to go. So great point, and great point everyone here. This has been great learning for me, but I believe it's for the entire community. So thank you again. I'm thankful that you could make time for this session. We would love to see you again, hopefully in person sooner than later. And have a good rest of the day. Be well, stay safe, and we'll move on to the next smaller business panel.
Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Ciao, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.